Clint Eastwood sat in the courtroom with his hands folded on the table in front of him. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were alert. At 94 years old, his body might have aged, but his mind remained sharp. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was taken, and people stood along the walls. Reporters filled the front row, their pens ready to write down every word. Fans and curious people filled the rest of the room, all wanting to see the famous actor and director on this important day. Judge William Brown entered the room, and everyone stood up. He was a serious man with gray hair and glasses. He had been a judge for 30 years and was known for being tough but fair. Today, his face looked even more serious than usual. "You may be seated," he said, and the room fell silent. Clint Eastwood's lawyer, Alan Green, sat next to him. He was a young man in his 40s with a reputation for taking on difficult cases. He had fought hard during the trial, but now he looked worried. He placed his hand briefly on Eastwood's shoulder. "Mr. Eastwood, please rise for the verdict," said Judge Brown. Clint Eastwood stood up slowly. He wore a simple dark blue suit with a white shirt and blue tie. He stood tall and straight, looking directly at the judge. "Clint Eastwood, this court has found you guilty of financial fraud resulting in losses of over $50 million to investors who trusted you. This is a serious crime that has hurt many people." A whisper went through the crowd. A woman in the back row began to cry softly. She had lost her life savings in what everyone believed was Eastwood's scheme. "Before I announce your sentence, do you have anything to say?" asked the judge. Eastwood cleared his throat. His voice was low but clear when he spoke. "I maintain my innocence, Your Honor. I did not commit this crime." Judge Brown nodded, but his expression didn't change. "The evidence says otherwise, Mr. Eastwood. The jury has found you guilty on all counts." The judge paused and looked at some papers in front of him. "Given the serious nature of this crime and the amount of money involved, I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison." The courtroom erupted in noise. Some people gasped. Others shouted. Reporters rushed out to break the news. 10 years for a 94-year-old man was essentially a life sentence. Judge Brown banged his gavel. "Order in the court." As the room quieted down, Eastwood remained standing, his face still showing no emotion. "You will begin serving your sentence immediately," said the judge. "Court is adjourned." 2 court officers approached Eastwood. One of them held handcuffs. For a moment, the older man stared at the cuffs and something flashed in his eyes. Then he put his hands out and allowed the officer to cuff him. As they led him toward the side door of the courtroom, Eastwood's eyes scanned the crowd. In the back row, a woman in her 50s sat quietly. She had brown hair with a few gray streaks and wore simple clothes that didn't stand out. This was Susan Miller. When Eastwood's eyes met hers, she gave a small, almost invisible nod. Something changed in Eastwood's expression, a tiny spark of what might have been hope. No one else noticed this exchange. They were all too busy watching the American film icon being led away in handcuffs. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Alan Green stepped out to face them. "My client is innocent," he said firmly. "We will appeal this decision. Mr. Eastwood has been framed, and we will prove it." The reporters shouted questions at him. "Who framed him? Do you have evidence? How is Mr. Eastwood taking the verdict?" Green raised his hands. "I can't answer more questions at this time. Please respect that this is a difficult day." He pushed through the crowd and got into a waiting car. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood was being processed for transport to the federal prison. They took his fingerprints and photo. They gave him prison clothes to change into, a simple orange jumpsuit. As he changed, a guard watched him. "Never thought I'd see Dirty Harry in orange," the guard said. Eastwood didn't reply. He folded his suit carefully and handed it to the guard. In another part of the city, FBI agent Frank Carter sat at his desk, looking at files from the Eastwood case. Carter was 45 years old with short brown hair and serious eyes. He had been with the FBI for 20 years and had worked on many important cases. He took a sip of cold coffee and frowned. "Something isn't right," he muttered to himself. His partner, Agent Lisa Moore, looked up from her desk. "Still can't believe Eastwood did it." Carter shook his head. "It's not that. The evidence ... it's too perfect. Like someone wanted us to find it." Moore rolled her eyes. "Or maybe he just didn't cover his tracks well. Not everyone is a master criminal, even if they played one in the movies." "Maybe," said Carter, but he didn't sound convinced. He pulled out a notebook and began writing down points that bothered him about the case. Across town, in a small office, reporter Megan Walsh was also thinking about the Eastwood case. She was 32, with red hair and determined green eyes. She worked for a small independent news outlet called The Truth Seeker. Unlike the big news companies, they didn't rush to judgment and tried to look deeper into stories. Her phone rang, and she answered it. "Walsh." "The Eastwood case isn't what it seems," said a man's voice. She didn't recognize it. "Who is this?" She asked. "A friend. Look into the testimony of Jack Nelson. His story doesn't add up. Check his bank records from last year." "How would I get access to his bank records?" she asked, but the caller had already hung up. Megan wrote down the name. Jack Nelson. He had been one of the main witnesses against Eastwood, claiming to have proof that the actor had known about the fraud. "Interesting," she said to herself. That evening, Susan Miller entered her small apartment and locked the door behind her. She checked that all the windows were secure and pulled the blinds. Then she took out a burner phone, the kind you buy with cash and throw away after using. She dialed a number. "It's done," she said when someone answered. "He's inside." "Good," said a man's voice. "Phase 1 complete. Now we wait." "How long?" she asked. "As long as it takes. We need them to believe they've won." Susan hung up and immediately removed the battery from the phone. She would dispose of it tomorrow in different trash cans across the city. She sat down at her kitchen table and opened a folder hidden inside a cookbook. Inside were photos of several powerful men, politicians, business leaders, and judges. Among them was a picture of Judge William Brown. She drew a red X across his photo. Clint Eastwood lay on a hard bed in a cell at the federal prison. The sounds of the prison at night surrounded him. Distant voices, metal doors closing, guards walking past. For the first time since his arrest, he was alone. He closed his eyes, but he wasn't trying to sleep. In his mind, he was reviewing the plan, every detail of it. There was no room for error. Too much was at stake. Few people knew the truth, that Clint Eastwood, American film legend, had voluntarily put himself in prison. His conviction for fraud was part of an elaborate plan to expose corruption at the highest levels of government. And business. Now, as he lay in his cell, the real work was about to begin. The secret he had carried into that courtroom was just the beginning of a dangerous game that would either save him or destroy him completely. 6 months before Clint Eastwood's trial, FBI agent Frank Carter sat at his desk looking at a new case file. His boss had just assigned him to investigate claims that the famous actor and director had been involved in a huge money fraud. Carter opened the file and began to read. "Eastwood?" he said to himself. Hard to believe. The file contained reports from investors who claimed they had lost millions in a scheme that Eastwood had promoted. There were bank records showing large sums of money moving between accounts. There were also copies of letters with what appeared to be Eastwood's signature, promising big returns on investments. Carter's boss, Director Paul Wilson, stopped by his desk. He was a tall man with gray hair and a serious face. "What do you think of the Eastwood case?" he asked. "Just starting to look at it, sir," Carter replied. "Seems odd that someone like him would need to steal money." Wilson nodded. "Rich people always want more money. Don't let his fame cloud your judgment. Follow the evidence. Yes, sir, Carter said. Over the next few weeks, Carter dug deeper into the case. He interviewed people who had lost money. He followed the trail of bank transfers. He examined the letters with Eastwood's signature. On the surface, everything pointed to Eastwood's guilt, but something didn't feel right to Carter. The evidence seemed too neat, too easy to find. In his 20 years with the FBI, he had never seen a case where all the pieces fell into place so perfectly. One day, he was looking at the bank records again when he noticed something strange. All the transfers had happened on the same day of the month, the 15th. This pattern seemed too regular for a criminal trying to hide his tracks. Carter decided to talk to his boss about his concerns. He knocked on Director Wilson's office door. "Come in," Wilson called. Carter entered and sat down. "Sir, I've been working on the Eastwood case, and I've found some strange patterns." Wilson looked up from his computer. "What kind of patterns?" Carter explained about the bank transfers all happening on the same day. "It's like someone wanted us to find them. And there's more. The signature on those letters doesn't match other examples of Eastwood's signature I've seen." Wilson frowned. "Are you suggesting someone is framing Eastwood?" "I think it's possible, sir. I'd like to dig deeper, maybe talk to Eastwood himself." Wilson was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No, we have enough evidence to make an arrest. The pressure from above is intense. People lost millions, Carter. They want someone to pay. But if he's innocent, that's for a court to decide." Wilson cut him off. "Stick to the evidence we have. That's an order." Carter left the office feeling uneasy. Why was his boss so quick to shut down his concerns? The next day, Carter received a notice that he was being reassigned to a different case in another city. The Eastwood case would be handled by another agent. The message was clear: stop asking questions. Meanwhile, Megan Walsh, the young reporter, had been following the Eastwood case with interest. After receiving the mysterious phone call about Jack Nelson, she began her own investigation. Jack Nelson was a businessman who had testified that Eastwood had personally asked him to invest in the scheme. His testimony was a key part of the case against Eastwood. Megan searched public records for information about Nelson. She discovered that his company had been close to bankruptcy last year. Then, suddenly he had enough money to pay all his debts. Where had that money come from? She called a friend who worked at a bank. "Hey Steve, I need a favor. Can you look into someone's bank records for me?" "Off the record." "That's illegal, Megan," Steve replied. "I could lose my job, I know. But this is important. I think an innocent man is being framed." There was a long pause. "Send me the details." "But you didn't get this from me." A few days later, Steve sent her an envelope. Inside were copies of Jack Nelson's bank records. Megan's eyes widened as she saw a deposit of $1 million made to his account 3 days before he first accused Eastwood. "Someone paid him to lie," she whispered. That evening, Megan was working late at her office when she heard a noise. She looked up to see a man in black clothing standing in her doorway. Before she could scream, he rushed toward her. Megan grabbed her pepper spray from her desk and sprayed it at the man's face. He yelled in pain, giving her enough time to run past him and out of the office. She ran to her car, her heart racing, and quickly drove away. She called the police, but when they checked her office, the man was gone. However, her computer was missing, along with her notes on the Eastwood case. Someone doesn't want me investigating this, she thought. She drove to her friend Lily's apartment. "I need a place to stay tonight," she told Lily. "And I need to borrow your laptop." In another part of the city, Susan Miller met with a man in a quiet restaurant. The man was Richard Dawson, an old friend of Eastwood's and a famous actor himself. He was in his 80s now, with white hair and kind eyes. "How is he?" Dawson asked quietly. "Holding up well," Susan replied. "He's tough. This plan is too dangerous. Dawson said, shaking his head. He's too old for this. It was his idea, Susan reminded him. And we're close to getting what we need. The people we're after trust each other now. They think they've won. What about Agent Carter? I heard he was reassigned. Susan nodded. They're worried he was getting too close to the truth. But he's still helping us unofficially. And the reporter? Walsh? She's digging in the right places. She found the payment to Nelson. Dawson sighed. I hate seeing my friend in prison for something he didn't do. It won't be for long, Susan assured him. Once we have all the evidence, we can bring the whole operation down. They finished their meal in silence, both worried about the risks. They were taking Dot in the federal prison. Clint Eastwood was carefully building a relationship with Harold Peterson, a former banker who was serving time for embezzlement. Peterson had connections to the criminal network they were investigating. Eastwood sat across from Peterson in the prison cafeteria. Heard you were in banking, he said casually. Peterson looked surprised that the famous actor was talking to him. Yeah, for 30 years. Until they caught me with my hand in the cookie jar. He laughed without humor. Funny how things turn out, Eastwood said. One day you're on top of the world, the next you're in here. Peterson studied him. Never thought I'd see someone like you in a place like this. Life is full of surprises. Over the next few weeks, Eastwood spent more time with Peterson. He listened to the man's stories about his life in banking. He shared simple stories from his own life, building trust. You know, Peterson said one day, I still have friends on the outside. People who can make life easier in here for both of us. Eastwood raised an eyebrow. What kind of friends? Powerful people. People who understand that money talks. Sounds like people I should meet, Eastwood said. Peterson smiled. Maybe you will, if you play your cards right. That night, Eastwood lay on his bed, thinking. The plan was working. Peterson was beginning to trust him. Soon, he might share information about the criminal network that had framed him. But time was running out. He had heard rumors that someone wanted him dead, someone who was worried he knew too much. Outside the prison walls, the small team working to clear Eastwood's name was facing growing danger. But they were also getting closer to the truth that would set him free. Susan Miller sat in her car outside a small coffee shop. She checked her watch. It was almost time for the meeting. She looked around carefully to make sure no one was watching her. After 5 minutes, she got out of the car and walked to the coffee shop. Inside, she ordered a black coffee and sat at a table in the back corner. 10 minutes later, Frank Carter walked in. He ordered a coffee and casually walked to her table. Mind if I sit here? All the other tables are taken, he said loudly enough for others to hear. Susan nodded, and Carter sat down across from her. Are you being followed? She asked quietly. I don't think so, Carter replied, but they're watching me at work. My boss asks too many questions about what I'm doing. We need to be careful, Susan said. How is the investigation going? Carter took a sip of his coffee. I've been looking into Director Wilson. He has some interesting connections. 3 years ago, he was almost bankrupt. Now he has a vacation home in Florida and a boat. Where did the money come from? That's what I'm trying to find out. But I need access to financial records that I can't get without official approval. Susan reached into her purse and slid a small flash drive across the table. This might help. It contains bank records for Wilson and several other officials. Our friend inside the bank got them for us. Carter took the drive and put it in his pocket. This is risky. If anyone finds out we're doing this ... I know. But Clint is counting on us. They finished their coffee in silence. As they were about to leave, Susan said, There's one more thing. The reporter, Megan Walsh. Someone broke into her apartment yesterday. Carter frowned. Was she hurt? No, she wasn't home. But they took her laptop and all her notes on the case. She's scared. She should be. Tell her to be careful. These people won't stop at breaking into apartments. Susan nodded. I'll contact her. We need to bring her into our group. She's found some good information. They left the coffee shop separately, careful not to be seen together. Meanwhile, in the federal prison, Clint Eastwood was continuing to build trust with Harold Peterson. They were playing chess in the prison recreation room. Peterson was a good player, but Eastwood was better. Checkmate, Eastwood said, moving his queen. Peterson laughed. You're too good at this. Where did you learn to play? My father taught me when I was a kid, Eastwood replied. Said it would teach me to think ahead. Peterson nodded. Thinking ahead is important, especially in here. He looked around the room, then leaned forward. I've been talking to my friends outside about you. Eastwood raised an eyebrow. Oh, what did you tell them? That you're not what people think. That you're smart and could be useful. Useful for what? Peterson smiled. Business opportunities. Even in prison, there are ways to make money, big money. Eastwood pretended to look interested. I'm listening. There's a big operation coming up. Moving money from one place to another, cleaning it up on the way. My friends need someone with your connections. What connections would those be? Eastwood asked carefully. You know, people in Hollywood, in politics. People who need to hide money or move it without questions. Eastwood nodded slowly. And what would I get out of this? Protection in here. Money waiting for you when you get out. And maybe. Peterson lowered his voice. A way to get out sooner than you think. This was exactly the kind of information Eastwood had been hoping for. He tried not to look too eager. Sounds interesting. When do I meet these friends of yours? Soon. They're arranging a visit. But first, I need to know I can trust you. How? Do I prove that? Peterson thought for a moment. There's a guard, Simmons. He brings things in for the right price. I need you to get close to him. Find out if he's been talking to the feds. Eastwood nodded. I can do that. Later that day, Eastwood was mopping the floor near the guard station. Officer Simmons was on duty. He was a young guard with a friendly face. Mr. Eastwood, Simmons said. Strange seeing someone like you doing prison work. Eastwood shrugged. Work is work. Keeps my mind busy. Must be quite a change from Hollywood. You could say that. Eastwood paused. I hear you're a guard who understands how things work in here. Simmons looked around nervously. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Peterson told me about you. The guard's face changed. We shouldn't talk about this here. Too many ears. When then? Tomorrow. I'll be doing cell checks on your block. We can talk then. Eastwood nodded and continued mopping. He had made contact. Now he needed to see if Simmons would lead him to more information. In another part of the city, Megan Walsh was meeting with Richard Dawson in a quiet restaurant. She was nervous about meeting the famous actor. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Mr. Dawson, she said. Call me Richard, he replied with a kind smile. Susan told me about your work on Clint's case. I'm grateful. I'm just trying to find the truth, Megan said. But someone doesn't want me to. They broke into my apartment and took all my research. That's why we're meeting. We believe you're in danger. We want to help. We? Who's we? Dawson looked around to make sure no one was listening. There's a small group of us working to prove Clint's innocence. Susan Miller, Agent Frank Carter, myself, and a few others. Megan looked surprised. Agent Carter? But he's FBI. I thought they were the ones who arrested Eastwood. Carter believes Clint was framed. He's been investigating on his own. Why are you telling me this? Megan asked. Because we need your help, and you need ours. Together, we might be able to uncover the truth before it's too late. Too late for what? Dawson's face grew serious. We have reason to believe there's a plan to silence Clint permanently. He knows too much. Megan felt a chill. You mean they want to kill him, in prison? It wouldn't be hard to arrange. Prison fights, accidents. They happen all the time. So, what's the plan? How do we help him? We need to gather enough evidence to force a new trial. We need to identify who's really behind the fraud and why they framed Clint. Megan thought for a moment. I found something about Jack Nelson, the main witness against Eastwood. He received a large payment just before he accused Eastwood. Who made the payment? It came from an offshore account. I was trying to trace it when my laptop was stolen. Dawson nodded. That's valuable information. We need to find out who controls that account. As they were talking, Dawson's phone buzzed. He looked at it and frowned. I need to go. Susan will contact you tomorrow with a secure place for us to meet. Be careful, Megan. Don't trust anyone. After Dawson left, Megan sat thinking about everything he had told her. She was now part of a secret group trying to save Clint Eastwood. It was dangerous, but it was also the biggest story of her career. Back at the prison, Eastwood lay on his bed, thinking about his conversation with Peterson. He was getting closer to the information he needed. But he also knew that the longer he stayed in prison, the more danger he was in. He had noticed a new inmate watching him during dinner. The man had gang tattoos and cold eyes. Eastwood had been in enough dangerous situations in his life to recognize a threat when he saw one. Was running out. He needed Peterson to introduce him to the people behind the fraud soon. His life depended on it. The next day, Clint Eastwood waited in his cell for Officer Simmons to come by for cell checks. He had spent the night thinking about what questions to ask the guard. He needed to get information without making Simmons suspicious. At 10 a.m., Simmons appeared at his cell door. "Morning, Eastwood," he said, looking up and down the hallway to make sure no one was watching. "Morning," Eastwood replied. "I can talk for a minute," Simmons said quietly. "What did Peterson tell you about me?" "That you can get things from the outside, that you help certain inmates." Simmons nodded. "For the right price, yes. What do you need?" Eastwood leaned closer to the bars. "Information about Peterson's friends on the outside." The guard looked nervous. "That's not what I usually provide. I bring in cigarettes, phones, sometimes drugs. Information is risky." "I can pay well," Eastwood said. "I still have money hidden where the government couldn't find it." This was a lie, but Eastwood knew it would interest the guard. Simmons thought for a moment. What kind of information? Names. Who is Peterson working with? Who are these big shots he talks about? Why do you want to know? Eastwood gave a small smile. "Let's just say I want to know who I'm getting into business with. I don't like surprises." Simmons looked up and down the hallway again. "There's a judge involved. Brown, the same one who sentenced you. And I've heard about some businessman named Edward Miller. Very rich, very connected." Eastwood kept his face neutral, but this was valuable information. Judge Brown was involved, and now he had a new name, Edward Miller. Anyone else? He asked. "There's talk about someone high up in the Justice Department." "I don't know the name," a voice called from down the hall. "Simmons, what's taking so long?" "I have to go," Simmons said quickly. "I'll see what else I can find out, but it'll cost you." "How much?" $10,000, in cash. "Have someone deliver it." "To my sister's house." Eastwood nodded. "Give me the address. I'll arrange it." After Simmons left, Eastwood sat on his bed, thinking about what he had learned. He needed to get this information to Susan Miller. He had a visit scheduled with his lawyer tomorrow. He would pass the information then. Meanwhile, Susan Miller, Frank Carter, Richard Dawson, and Megan Walsh were meeting in a small apartment that Susan had rented under a fake name. They sat around a kitchen table covered with papers, photos, and laptop computers. "What have we got so far?" Susan asked. Carter pointed to a photo of Director Wilson. Wilson started receiving large deposits to an offshore account 3 years ago. Around the same time, the first investors were being pulled into the fraud scheme. Any connection to Edward Miller? Susan asked. Yes, Megan said, turning her laptop around to show them. Miller is the CEO of Global Investments. His company manages billions of dollars. And look at this, he was college roommates with Judge Brown. So we have Wilson at the FBI, Brown on the bench, and Miller with the money, Dawson summarized. But why frame Clint? What's the connection? I think I found it, Susan said, pulling out a folder. 5 years ago, Clint was making a movie about government corruption. He interviewed several whistleblowers for research. One of them worked for Global Investments and had evidence of money laundering. What happened to the movie? Megan asked. It was never made. The studio said it was too controversial. But Clint kept all his research materials. So they framed him to discredit him, Carter said. If he ever went public with what he knew, people would think it was just a convicted criminal trying to shift blame. Exactly, Susan nodded. And they got his money too. Win-win for them. We need hard evidence, Dawson said. All of this is circumstantial. No judge would overturn his conviction based on what we have. Maybe Peterson can lead Clint to more concrete evidence, Susan suggested. He's supposed to introduce Clint to some of the key players soon. That's risky, Carter warned. The longer he stays in that prison, the more danger he's in. I heard rumors that someone put a hit on him. We need to warn him, Megan said. His lawyer is visiting him tomorrow, Susan replied. I'll get a message to him. The next day, Alan Green, Eastwood's lawyer, sat across from him in the prison visiting room. They spoke quietly so the guards couldn't hear. Susan sent a message, Green said. They know about Miller, Brown, and Wilson. They're making progress. But need more concrete evidence, Eastwood nodded. Tell her I might have a way to get it. Peterson is going to introduce me to some of his contacts. Also, tell her to look into a connection in the Justice Department. Simmons mentioned someone high up is involved. Be careful, Clint. Carter says there might be a hit on you. I know. I've noticed someone watching me. Big guy with Gan tattoos. Maybe. We should try to get you out now, before we have all the evidence. Eastwood shook his head. No. We need to bring down the whole network. Otherwise, they'll just come after me on the outside. As they were talking, Peterson walked into the visiting room with a woman. She was well-dressed and looked like a lawyer. They sat at a table not far from Eastwood. That's Peterson, Eastwood whispered. I don't know the woman. Green glanced over casually. That's Catherine Lewis. She's a high-powered attorney who represents several big corporations, including Global Investments. Miller's company, Eastwood said. Interesting. After Green left, Eastwood returned to the common area. Peterson approached him with a smile. I saw you with your lawyer, Peterson said. Still trying to appeal? Eastwood shrugged. He's not very hopeful. Says the evidence against me is too strong. That's tough. But maybe there are other ways too. Solve your problems. Like the business opportunity you mentioned? Peterson nodded. My friends were impressed by what I told them about you. They want to meet. When? Tomorrow. They're coming as my legal team. We'll meet in the private conference room. Eastwood tried not to show his excitement. This was what he had been waiting for. I look forward to it. That night, as Eastwood was walking back to his cell after dinner, the man with the Gan tattoos stepped in front of him. He was huge, with muscles built from years of prison workouts. 2 other inmates stood nearby, watching. Eastwood, the man said, I hear you've been asking questions about things that aren't your business. Eastwood stared at him calmly. I don't know what you're talking about. Peterson's friends. Judge Brown, Miller, ring any bells? So this was it. They knew he was digging for information. Eastwood looked around. There were no guards nearby. The other inmates in the area were moving away, not wanting to be involved in what was about to happen. Who sent you? Eastwood asked. The man smiled, showing a gold tooth. People who pay well. Nothing personal, old man. But you know too much. He pulled a homemade knife from his waistband. Eastwood backed up, looking for anything he could use as a weapon. He was 94 years old, facing a man half his age and twice his size. The odds were not good, but Clint Eastwood had spent his life playing tough men in movies. He had learned a few things along the way, and he wasn't ready to die in prison. As the man lunged forward with the knife, Eastwood grabbed the metal food tray from a nearby table and swung it hard, hitting the man's hand. The knife clattered to the floor. The man roared in pain and anger. A prison alarm began to sound. Someone had alerted the guards. The man looked around, then pointed at Eastwood. "This isn't over," he growled before he and his friends quickly walked away. Guards rushed into the area. "What's going on here?" one of them demanded. "Nothing," Eastwood said. "Just a disagreement about the food." The guard looked skeptical but didn't push it. "Get back to your cell, Eastwood." As Eastwood walked to his cell, he realized that time was running out. The meeting tomorrow with Peterson's friends might be his only chance to get the evidence he needed. After that, he would need to find a way to get out of prison before the man with the gold tooth tried again. The next morning, Clint Eastwood prepared for his meeting with Peterson's contacts. He combed his hair and made sure his prison uniform was as neat as possible. He knew this meeting was his best chance to get the evidence he needed. A guard came to his cell at 10 a.m. "Eastwood, you have visitors in the private conference room." Eastwood followed the guard down the long hallway. His heart was beating faster than usual, but his face remained calm. Years of acting helped him hide his nervousness. The private conference room was small with a table and 6 chairs. Peterson was already there with 3 other people. Catherine Lewis, the lawyer Eastwood had seen the day before, a man in an expensive suit who looked to be in his 60s, and a younger man with glasses who was setting up a laptop. "Ah, here he is," Peterson said with a smile. "Clint, meet my associates. This is Catherine Lewis, my attorney. This is Edward Miller, CEO of Global Investments." Eastwood shook hands with them, paying special attention to Miller. So this was the man behind the scheme. "And this is Kyle Bennett, our technical expert," Peterson continued, pointing to the younger man. "Nice to meet you all," Eastwood said, sitting down at the table. "Mr. Eastwood," Miller began, "Harold has told us about your interest in our business opportunities. Before we discuss details, I need to know, can we trust you?" Eastwood looked directly at Miller. "I'm a 94-year-old man in prison. I have nothing to lose and everything to gain by working with you." Miller seemed satisfied with this answer. "Good. Let me explain what we do. My company, Global Investments, manages money for very wealthy clients. Some of these clients prefer to keep their money private, away from government eyes and taxes." "Money laundering," Eastwood said bluntly. Catherine Lewis winced at the words, but Miller just smiled. "A crude term, but essentially correct. We move money through various accounts and investments until it becomes clean and untraceable." "And where do I fit in?" Eastwood asked. "You have connections in Hollywood and politics that could be very useful to us. Production companies that need funding, charities that don't ask too many questions about large donations, political campaigns that need support." Eastwood nodded. "I see. And what's in it for me?" "Protection while you're in here," Peterson said. "And when you get out, a generous percentage of any business you bring our way." "How generous?" 10%, Miller said. "Which could mean millions." "For you. Sounds fair," Eastwood replied. "But I need to know more about your operation before I commit. How do you move the money? Who else is involved?" Miller glanced at Lewis, who nodded slightly. "Kyle shown the system." Bennett turned his laptop so Eastwood could see the screen. "This is our network," he explained. "We move money through these offshore accounts, then into shell companies. then into legitimate investments. Eastwood studied the screen, trying to memorize as much as possible. He saw account numbers, company names, and amounts of money, millions of dollars moving through the system. "And who oversees all this?" Eastwood asked. "I'm assuming you have people in important positions protecting you," Miller smiled. "Very good, Mr. Eastwood. Yes, we have friends in high places. Judge William Brown handles any legal issues that come our way. Director Paul Wilson at the FBI makes sure investigations go nowhere. And our most valuable asset." He paused for effect. "Deputy Attorney General Howard Parker ensures that no charges are ever filed against us." Eastwood kept his face neutral, but inside he was excited. This was exactly what he needed: names, positions, and now he was seeing proof on the computer. "Screen, impressive," he said. "But why tell me all this? Aren't you worried I might use this information against you?" Miller laughed. "Who would believe you? You're a convicted criminal. Besides, if you ever tried to expose us, you wouldn't live long enough to tell your story." His voice was friendly, but his eyes were cold. "I understand," Eastwood said. "So, when do we start?" "We already have a project in mind," Miller said. "A movie production company that needs financing. Once you're on board, we'll give you the details." The meeting continued for another hour, with Bennett showing more of their financial system and Miller explaining how Eastwood would fit into their operation. When it was over, Peterson walked Eastwood back to his cell. "They liked you," Peterson sighed. "That's good. Not everyone gets to meet Miller himself." "I'm honored," Eastwood replied dryly. "When will I see them again?" "Soon. They're working on the details of your first project." That night, Eastwood couldn't sleep. He had the names and evidence he needed, but he had to get the information to his team outside, and he knew his time was running out. The man with the gold tooth would try again. The next morning, Eastwood was in the prison yard when Officer Simmons approached him. "Package for you," he said quietly, slipping a small object into Eastwood's hand. It was a tiny cell phone, no bigger than a lighter. Eastwood quickly put it in his pocket. "Thanks. My money?" Simmons asked. "Being delivered today," Eastwood assured him. Later, in a quiet corner of the prison library, Eastwood turned on the phone and sent a text to a number Susan had made him memorize. Meeting happened. Have names and evidence. Miller, Brown, Wilson, and Deputy Egg Parker all involved. Saw financial records on laptop. Need extraction ASAP. Gold tooth trying to kill me. He deleted the message after sending it and hid the phone in his sock. Outside the prison, Susan Miller received the text. She immediately called the others to an emergency meeting. They gathered at Richard Dawson's house. "Clint has the evidence," Susan told them, "but he's in immediate danger. We need to get him out now." "How?" Megan asked. "We can't just break him out of prison." "No," Carter said, "but we can get him transferred. If we can convince the prison there's a credible threat to his life, they might move him to another facility. During the transfer, we could arrange for him to testify to a judge," Susan added. "With the names and information he has, we could get an emergency hearing." "I know a judge who isn't corrupt," Carter said. "Judge Martinez. She's tough but fair. If we can get Clint in front of her with this evidence, she might grant him protective custody." "We need to move fast," Richard said. "Let me call in some favors. I know people in the governor's office who might help." They worked through the night, making calls, preparing documents, and setting up their plan. By morning, they had arranged for Eastwood to be transferred to a courthouse for a special hearing with Judge Martinez. Back in the prison, Eastwood was eating breakfast when Peterson sat down across from him. "Bad news," Peterson said quietly. "Miller is worried you know too much. He's called off the deal." Eastwood kept his face calm, but he understood the message. Miller had ordered his death. "When?" he asked. "Today, in the showers. Gold tooth and His friends, why are you telling me this? Peterson looked uncomfortable. Because I like you, old man. And I don't want your death on my conscience. I'm a criminal, but I'm not a killer. Can you help me? Peterson shook his head. I've done all I can by warning you. You're on your own now. As Peterson walked away, a guard approached Eastwood. Eastwood, pack your things. You're being transferred. Where to? Eastwood asked, surprised. Courthouse. Judge's orders. Eastwood felt relief wash over him. His team had come through. He was getting out before Gold Tooth could make his move. But as he walked back to his cell to pack, he saw Gold Tooth watching him from across the room. The man's eyes were filled with hate. Eastwood knew he wasn't safe yet. He still had to make it out of the prison alive.